Welcome to Radio Today broadcasting in Johannesburg on 1485 AM and nationally on DSTV Audio Channel 869.
Conversations with Niki is brought to you by studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets. Welcome once again to Conversations with Niki. I'm Niki Seberini, and as always, I'm so delighted to be with you. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'd like to welcome our syndication partner listeners, Eldo's FM, Chai FM, Kawi FM, West Coast FM, MC 90.3, that's in Plet, Neisner FM, Wild Coast FM, and Bay FM. Great to have you listening as well. And also thank you so much for all the likes on my Facebook page. I have been mentioning that I've got a great giveaway, and at the beginning of Feb, or the second week of Feb, I'm going to be announcing the winner of the Colpad 2 7-inch Wi-Fi tablet. So tabletworld.co.za came on board and said, we'll give you one of these to give away to one of your listeners. And really, in order to stand a chance of winning this Colpad 2, you just have to go to my Facebook page and like it. And then Lawrence from Tablet World will come into the studio and we're going to do a draw. It's as simple as that. So if you're wondering to yourself, how on earth do I get to the Facebook page? Very easy. Just press, go onto the computer, facebook.com/Conversations with Niki, which is one word, and Niki is spelled N-I-K-I. Really, really as simple as that. And also, I do encourage you to visit the website, and that is also Conversations with Niki, one word, and Niki spelled N-I-K-I, because all the shows each week are put onto that website. And often I get people contacting me saying, yes, but I had to leave and I wasn't able to listen to the entire interview. Not a problem. It's there. You just click on the link and you get to listen to the entire show. And of course, you know, you are such an important part of Conversations with Niki, because the content and everything is for you. It's this show is seen as a force for good. It's an opportunity to be exposed to enlightening individuals. It's an opportunity to get insights from experts, and I really, really do hope that you are gaining from that. So if there's anything that you think I should be covering, if there's stories that simply need to be told, I'd love it if you contacted me, and you can do that via my website as well. Once again, www.conversationswithniki.co.za, and Conversations with Niki is one word, and Niki is spelled N-I-K-I. So we have really a fascinating show coming up. John Edward is coming to South Africa, psychic medium. Everyone's running around desperately trying to get tickets. Now, you may be a great follower of John Edward. I have to admit I am. Or maybe you think that what he's doing is a little bit odd and you don't understand. Well, I am about to speak to him. He's going to share his story and his insights. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Mankind is incredible. I mean, we've managed to put a man on the moon. We've considerably extended our life expectancy. We have incredible technology whereby we can communicate with millions of people simultaneously around the world. And this is really just to name a few of the accomplishments that we as human beings have achieved over the past 100 years or so. Now, one of the things, though, that we have not been able to conquer is death. It's still a mystery. There are still these unanswered questions, and we have really no idea what in fact happens to us when we take our last breath and when we leave this life. And over thousands of years, you've had tribes, you've had cultures, you've had people who have tried to communicate with the gods, with the spirits, through seances, through going into trances. Look at the wonderful Bushman art that we have today. And this fascination with death and the afterlife continues. And that is why when someone comes to this country who has this contact, who is able to channel and who is able to communicate with those who have passed, well, people sit up and they take notice. There is this incredible fascination and this want and great desire to be able to communicate with our loved ones who have passed on. So I'm delighted to welcome John Edward, a psychic medium, author and lecturer, onto the show. So John, welcome, and thank you very much for taking time to chat to us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
So, John, I mean, you're no stranger to South Africa. You've been here a number of times, but it's been quite a while. I mean, you haven't been here for 3 years. You're coming in March 2014. South Africa, I mean, is it a special place for you? Does it hold a certain attraction for you?
It does for a lot of reasons. Africa in general. My wife is originally from Angola, so when I first met her, I heard a lot about where she was born, and then she moved to South Africa. So she left there at the age of 7 and then moved to Portugal and then subsequently the United States. So for me, when I met her 20 years ago, hearing about South Africa all the time and the fact that she wanted to go back and she wanted to go back and she wanted to go back and she wanted to go back was kind of made me feel connected. And then I have a really good friend who's a world champion dancer who's from South Africa, and I met him here in the States. And then I would hear about South Africa from him. So there was always this kind of like, pardon the analogy, drumbeat of South Africa kind of calling. So when I had the opportunity to come there and work there and see the beauty of the country and meet the people, I kind of felt like I was kind of reconnecting with something I'd never met but yet felt connected to.
Well, that's fantastic. Listen, I mean, I love South Africa. I'm a true patriot, and I think that we are an incredible people. But from your perspective, I mean, you're talking about this connection that you have. But when you come here and you have your seminars, and because you travel all over the world and you're dealing with lots of different people, are we different? Do you think, by virtue of the fact that we've had the past that we've had, that we've come out of what we have come out of, is there a difference in energy levels because you're sensitive to that, or? No, not really, and I promise you I won't be upset with your answer.
No, the God's honest truth is that there is a difference. It's probably one of the only places that I've gone, separate from Australia, where there's a level of respect and appreciation for ancestry in a reverence. There's a reverence to the ancestors, a respect that is paid, and honor. And for me, I travel the world doing this. I've been in so many different countries and so many different parts of the United States. For me to get people to honor Grandpa, is a big deal. So many people don't know their grandparents' names when they come through, or a great uncle. And the level of immediate connection, if it's not there on an emotional level, people sometimes don't show an interest. So it's like they sometimes don't have an interest from where they came from. So from my line of work to be in a place where that's revered, it's a very cool thing.
I mean, it's true. I mean, it's very much a part of the South African culture. You mentioned that you had a best friend who was a dancing champion, and I don't know if many people know this about you, John, but I mean, not only were you a phlebotomist. I mean, I had to look up what a phlebotomist was, and I mean, you have this interest in healthcare, and I know that's testing blood or extracting blood or whatever it is, but you were also a ballroom dancing instructor. I mean, I learned a whole lot about you, Mr. Edward.
Yes. My background is in healthcare. So my college degree from university is in healthcare administration and public administration. And I always had a draw towards the healing kind of energy of life. So I decided that, you know what, I need to kind of stop doing the video store job and get a real job in a hospital, because that's what you're going to college for.
Right.
So I was hired in a laboratory as a phlebotomist, which is basically the person that nobody wants to see because you'll be sticking them with a needle to draw their blood. But I did that for a number of years, and that was my entrance to the hospital world. And then I left the clinical side to go into the administration side, which I really did not like. I much preferred the patient clinical side, and thought, oh my goodness, I made a huge mistake. I need to go back to school for healthcare in a, either nurse, doctor, physician's assistant kind of program, because I really didn't like the administration side of it. And as an outlet, because I wasn't happy with my day job, I decided to do something more. And I had always done the psychic stuff, but it was never, I never looked at it as this is my job. I looked at it as my duty, like this is my passion, this is what I have to do.
Right.
It was never going to be my career. Funny. But ballroom dancing kind of came in a very, very pivotal moment for me, where I just needed fun. I needed to have fun. And somebody said, let's go do that. And I went to do that. And I loved it. I met my wife. I met a great circle of friends. Michael Wentink, who's the champion dancer from South Africa. We've been, friends now for 20 years. It's just this whole other world that I kind of was part of. So yeah, what started as a hobby became something more of a, I could never call it a job or a career for me because it was just too much fun.
A passion. Well, it's just interesting. It's interesting how you were gravitating towards dealing with people, and also for me, ballroom or dancing is about it's an energetic way of moving your body. You're not in your head. You're in your body, and you going beyond that. So it's quite interesting that that's what it is for me.
Oh,
it's interesting that was an outlet.
It is absolute 100% communication through energy and touch. When you're watching people dance, people don't realize the connections that are taking place there. And when I would train people how to dance, I would make them close their eyes, and I would teach the steps, and I'd be like, you have to rely on what you're feeling. The lady has to allow the gentleman to lead, and the gentleman has to actually use that as the one place in their relationship that he's going to be allowed to actually lead, because she's going backwards and he can't say. So it's a communication, and it's also an energetic trust that you're going to be able to move and guide a person. And then once you kind of get that, wow, the connection that you feel when you're moving to music is a pretty awesome one.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. John, I introduced you as a psychic medium, and maybe there are people who don't know what a psychic medium is. So we've spoken a little bit about the energies, and this is something that someone identified in you. I think when you were 15 years old, they said that you had this gift to be a medium. But maybe you can just explain very quickly how that works.
Sure. First things first is that I always tell people that we need to get rid of the word gift altogether when it comes to the psychic community, because what it does is it deems the psychic as being special and immediately sets them apart from the general population and puts them above. So I like people to realize that I'm no different than anybody that's listening to what you're broadcasting, and I've just worked at my own abilities. I look at it more of an ability. Granted, I might have a natural genetic predisposition. My abilities might be stronger than most, but I've also worked at them, and after 3 decades, I could utilize them in the way that I do. For the folks that are listening, there are psychics, and then there are mediums. Every psychic has the ability to connect with energy and talk a little bit about how that energy is playing out in their client or sitter's life. We could talk about where they're at, where they're coming from, and then where they're heading towards on what's called a line of probability. So a prediction is really not a prediction. It's really more of a projection based upon where a person is, and their choices and decisions using their free will can affect the outcomes of what the projection might be. And then there's a medium. A medium is a bridge between the physical world and the non-physical world, the spirit world, the other side, heaven, the hereafter, whatever you want to call it. But it's a connection between this world and the next. Every medium is a psychic first, meaning a medium is using their psychic abilities to be able to make those connections. But not every psychic is a medium. And I think what's really important is that there are a lot of people out there all around the world that are claiming to be mediums when they're really psychics who can on occasion make a connection. And there's a very, very big difference. And I use healthcare because it's my background. And I say there are general practitioners, there are regular MDs, regular doctors, and then there are specialists. And when you want a heart surgeon, you go to your cardiologist for the recommendation for your cardiac surgeon. So I know a lot about astrology, but I don't know enough about astrology to sit down and do your chart.
Right.
So at a certain point, past the basics of your sun, your moon, and your rising sign, I'm going to say, now you need to go see an astrologer to know more about that. So I think it's really important for people to recognize the differences, that there are people who do astrology, there are people who do numerology, there are people who do regular readings, psychic readings, there are people who do rune casting, there are people who do past life regression therapy, and then there are mediums. And that we should look at those as being very, very different fields, but the line between psychic and medium gets very, very blurred because people want the immediate gratification of saying, I can do a mediumship reading, and it's immediate gratification because you can make a connection with somebody. But you got to be careful because grief is a very, very real thing, and you don't want to be dealing with somebody who's not a medium when they're saying that they are.
Well, as I said, I mean, we have this fascination with death because no one really knows with absolute certainty what happens when we leave this world. And, we all have different ways of dealing with the loss. And as you said, grief is we process it all completely differently. So you're in an area that you can bring a lot of light and a lot of love and a sense of calm, I suppose, to a whole lot of people. But for other people, I can imagine, John, you can stir emotions of frustration, anger, disbelief. How do you feel about this very raw connection that you have with these very real feelings that people have?
Well, two things. I think that, when you've ever climbed a mountain, and you get to the top, there's a vista that you can see. But when you're at the top of that mountain, when you're at the top of that volcano, when you're at the top of that pyramid, there's different vistas that you can see depending upon which direction you're approaching it from, right, and which direction you're looking. I think that mediums, myself included, have kind of shined a light into one snapshot. I'll call it a glimpse of the ability to communicate with this realm, that this realm exists. But I think science has done a lot of work in the last 20 years where it too is shining a light, saying there's measurable data, there's literal quantifying evidence that there's something that can be explored, examined, and documented. And there are different universities that are doing studies, quantum physics alone. And then you have the near-death experience folks, the people who have had near-death experiences, who some scientists will dismiss and say that, it's the brain shutting down and that's why they're seeing a tunnel. But then there's stuff that goes beyond that, where on a consciousness level, there are things that these folks should not be able to know. There are things that have happened in rooms where people were pronounced dead, conversations that are validated after the fact. There are now doctors who have had these experiences, like Dr. Evan Alexander, who wrote a book that gained worldwide success. There's Anita Moorjani, I believe is her name, who is also kind of shining a light on this. So there's a really fast-moving machine of information that's helping to kind of build more on what this world to that world can kind of look like. The latter part of your question is, yes, I'm very, very aware that the subject matter, it's a polarizing subject matter. It elicits a powerful, visceral response where 20% of the population go, oh my God, I think that's amazing, and I'm so into that, and I so believe in that, and I so connected with it. 60% of the population are going, kind of open to it, not really sure. And then there's 20% of the population that are equally opposing to it, where fundamentally it's challenging their belief system, their lack of a belief system, their religious, upbringing. And I respect it all. I do. I respect it all. I kind of step away from it, and I kind of feel like, here's my deal. I offer information. I don't mean to challenge anybody. It's not my goal. I really want to just share, teach, and say, hey, here's my experience. And I'm kind of like a chef. I'm gonna cook my specialty, and I'm gonna serve it. And if it feels right for you to taste it, great. If it's something that you like, awesome. But if you're allergic to it for whatever reason, don't eat it. It's kind of
it's up to you.
That. So
it's up to you.
I'm not force feeding anybody. I want to be really clear. And I always tell people, I'm not always the right medium for a person. I have a very, very matter-of-fact, direct, somewhat in-your-face kind of personality, and I bring that to what I do. So a lot of folks will come with this, you need to wow me, shock me, prove it to me attitude, and they last about 5 minutes in my office where I'll be like, yeah, we're done. And they'll look at me like, what? I've been on your waiting list for 7 years. And I literally said to this one person, then you need to act like you've been on my waiting list for 7 years, because I don't have to read you.
I hear you, John. But yeah, and I suppose you have to divorce it because you have these abilities, as you've said, and in life you can't make everybody happy. You're always going to have the naysayers, and then you're always going to have the people who are going to follow. it's so, I suppose, it's so public for you. You've just got to, well, I suppose the question I'm asking is, you know, is it a thick skin, or is it, as you say, you just the chef saying, this is what I'm serving up, enjoy it or don't?
I think it is. I think you have to develop a thick skin. I think you have to look at the different levels of understanding where people are coming from.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody just suffered a loss, and they're angry, well, that's a different kind of understanding that you have to have. You know, as opposed to somebody who's an atheist or an agnostic, who's coming from, you know, who's saying that they're a man of science and that they need proof. You know, those people I don't really have a lot of time for. Then you have the fundamental religious folks who, you know, go on the attack. I don't really have a lot of time for them either. You know, I respect their lack of belief or choice not to, but here's the problem. I never attack people for not believing.
Yeah.
I don't call people names for not believing. I don't attack their family for not believing. You know, I kind of respect that. I don't always find that the people who are non-believers are as respectful in the reciprocal, you know, way.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I think we need to move on because we've got far more interesting things to talk about than that. And that is, I mean, you spoke about scientists, you spoke about quantum physics, and quantum physics is all about, you know, it's atoms it's all energy, and it's moving all the time. You know, that's how we made up of, and I suppose that's a very simplistic way of my understanding of it. So if it is all of this energy and it's vibrating and moving all the time, and we know that energy cannot be destroyed. Tell me if I'm right or wrong here, John. I mean, this is just from books I've read, and this is kind of what I've put together. So if energy cannot be destroyed, then when someone does pass, what happens to their energy? Would that be their soul? Would you talk about passing on to another realm? And is that what you're picking up on as a medium, when you're doing a reading?
Absolutely. I think that the consciousness, our soul, our consciousness is vibrating at one rate of speed inside this physical body, very much like a helicopter on the ground. You can count its blades, you can see it.
Right.
But when that helicopter needs to elevate off the ground, those blades start rotating at such a high rate of speed that you no longer see them. You're not able to see them with the naked eye. But yet you logically know that they're there because that helicopter wouldn't be flying if it didn't have that rotation so quickly to get it off the ground. So using that analogy, imagine the cells, our consciousness, vibrating at such a high rate of speed that it leaves the body, it elevates the consciousness outside of the body, and you can't see it. But yet I try to get people to recognize it's still there. It's still connected to you. And it's that love consciousness that wants to connect with us and we want to connect with on some level. And I think it's a different dimension that's kind of overlaid to the world that we're living in.
So how does it come to you, John, when you are doing one of your seminars? So, for example, when you come to South Africa and you're sitting in a room of people, how is it a picture that comes to you? Do you see a person? Is it symbols? How is it that you experience this?
It's a multi-sensory experience for me, where I'm seeing, hearing, and feeling energy all at the same time. It's not one-dimensional. It's not like I'm just seeing a person. I'm being bombarded with images, with feelings, with thoughts, with words, and it's like psychic charades. Like I have to kind of interpret what it is that I'm seeing,
right,
or trying to get somebody to understand what it is that I'm feeling and putting words to it. It's not like I'm seeing people in a three-dimensional human way. I'm seeing images and pictures and glimpses, and it's like a lot of, imagine taking a slideshow and very rapidly going through all the photos really fast, and then hearing things in your mind's voice overlaid on top of that, and then getting a feeling on top of that. All three of those things happening simultaneously, and then trying to explain what you think it means.
So the first time that you experienced that, I mean, I'm just trying to relate to what you're saying. I mean, I suppose if I close my eyes at night, just before I'm going to sleep, I can see lots of images, and sometimes I hear, you know, their words, and maybe that's because I'm processing what's happened during the day, or I'm thinking about what I have to do tomorrow, and it's confusing, and, you know, eventually I fade off into another world and I'm sleeping. So when that happened to you, how did you know that it wasn't just your imagination, that you weren't just dreaming or sleeping or whatever it is, and that it was something real and something that you could use to help other people?
Well, I started doing this work as a psychic. Like, I wasn't doing mediumship work. I started in 1985, and in 1985, people came to see me just for psychic readings, what was happening in their life now, what was coming up for them, you know, kind of working through some of their issues and job stuff, relationships. I had absolutely no interest whatsoever in talking to dead people or being a medium. Zip, nada. It made no sense to me as to why people would do that. Granted, I was 15 years old. I had a very good friend at the time who was a medium, was a psychic, astrologer, phenomenal influence on me. And she used to say all the time, you are a medium. It's in your chart. You have it in your chart. You could do this, you know. And I would be like, I don't do that. I don't have any interest in it. Well, long story short, I predicted my uncle's passing, and it seemed like in 1987, when he passed, it somehow activated that aspect of my ability. Now, it technically was there the entire time, and I had definitely gotten information psychically that was much more of a mediumship level. But when he passed in 1987, and because I saw it, and I was so tethered to it and tried to stop it, and I couldn't, and he was only 52, it kind of blew the door off in some way. That door never shut again. And it became an active pursuit of understanding it.
John, may I just ask, I mean, I don't want to go, you know, very personally into your life, but if you say you tried to stop it, if this is something you predicted, how did you deal with the fact that your uncle then died and you had a premonition that it was going to happen?
Honestly, I think I almost had a nervous breakdown, to be really honest, because I couldn't understand why God would allow me to see something like that. And
not be able to do something about it.
And not stop it.
Yeah.
And when I tell you I tried to stop it, I mean, I really tried to stop it. Like, I tried to get my family to take me seriously. I went to my mother and I said to her, you know, I don't think they're listening. I said, there's something really wrong with him. They're not listening to me. And he had just had a doctor's appointment, and they gave him a clean bill of health in October. And I tried as hard as I possibly could, and then my mom said, well, I'll have my niece, my cousin, her niece, his daughter, come over. And they did, and my mom was going to try to, you know, over dinner and tea, try to get them to kind of have a conversation. And I literally remember looking at her and I said, Roseanne, do you love your father? And she goes, of course I love him. She looked at me like I was crazy. I said, well, he's going to die if you don't get him to the emergency room. And my cousin looked at me like I was absolutely a lunatic.
Sure.
And my mother looked at me and she just shook her head and she went, well, that was subtle, not exactly how I would have handled it. And you know, I kept erupting like that because I couldn't understand why nobody was taking me seriously. Well, they take me seriously now because it was a very, very painful thing to have to witness. But it was bookended because a year and a half later, in 1989, my mom was diagnosed with cancer and died, and I got nothing on that. So I had these two very personal family experiences that, got to tell you, were really, really hard to deal with in my teenage years because, you know, at 16 I saw my uncle's passing and couldn't stop it. At 19 I didn't see my mom's passing and I couldn't stop that. And it was this weird paradigm, this duality of like a universal, ha-ha, you know, here you have this ability, but you know what, you can't stop it.
But maybe it was a universal lesson, as in the first instance, you can't change people's lives. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. You know, if your uncle was meant to go, he was meant to go. And maybe with your mother, the reminder was you have this ability, but again, you can't be God.
Absolutely. I think those two experiences for me were so formative in the understanding of the subject matter that when people come to me and they do the why me, why did this happen to me? You know, I have this experience to say, listen, you want to talk about why me? You want to talk about being angry? You want to talk about understanding, you know, this subject matter and still having to be a participant in it? And that's just it. We are all here in the classroom of life. Our soul is matriculating in the University of Earth, and we're here to teach lessons and learn lessons and evolve through it as best as we possibly can. You know, and there's always new ways that we're doing it. Like, I've been very resistant to social media for years. And, you know, I first got involved with Facebook, and I have a very active Facebook kind of community, and from all around the world. And I saw it as a platform.
Yeah.
So I started using that as a way of getting people to evolve. In the last couple of months, I just joined Twitter, and I was very resistant to doing that. But I saw it as an opportunity to be able to interact with people. And all morning, for me, I was answering people's questions in small little bursts, in little ways, to kind of help them, understand that, well, that maybe wasn't a dream. Maybe that was your nephew or your brother coming toward you. Or if you have the grandparent who's dealing with Alzheimer's, still communicate with them, because it's going to be helpful for them and you to know that you're not mourning that person because they're not gone yet. So little ways like that, I look at those two experiences at 16 and 19, that now at 44, I've got 3 decades of experience that, when I'm interacting with folks, like through the radio or social media, I now have the ability to be able to kind of speak with a level of experience.
Yeah, I hear that. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is S.V. Prinsloo, and I'm the HOD of IT Integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
Studyapps.co.za. Well, if you've just tuned in, welcome. It's Conversations with Niki. I'm Niki Seberini, very, very happy to be with you. And I have John Edward on the line. He will be coming to South Africa soon, and John is busy sharing his life story with us. Before we continue, though, I'd like to welcome our syndication partner listeners. That's Eldo's FM, Chai FM, Kawi FM, West Coast FM, MC 90.3 FM in Plet, Neisen FM, Wild Coast, and Bay FM. And also a reminder, I am giving away a Coldpad 2 7-inch Wi-Fi tablet. That is courtesy of tabletworld.co.za. Very simple. If you would like to stand a chance of winning that Coldpad, do visit my website, my Facebook page, and like it. And then the second week of Feb, Lawrence will be in the studio. We'll do a draw and we'll be announcing the winner. So all you have to do is go to facebook.com/conversations with Niki and press like. It's as simple as that. And John, any bad, negative experiences? I mean, when you're channeling and you are communicating with those who have passed, have there? I mean, I would like to think that the experiences are good. I'd like to think that, when you have a seminar and there are a whole lot of people waiting for you to connect with someone that they love who has passed, that they're good experiences. But I'm sure there have been some negative ones in the past. And how do you deal with that?
Well, negative in the sense that information comes through that people maybe don't want to hear. I mean, that's negative. But the messages themselves are coming from a place of love. They're coming from a place of light.
Is it always from a place of love, John?
They're definitely coming from a place of love. They're always coming from a place of positivity and love. And I kind of feel like as a medium, my job is to leave people better than I find them, even if I'm disseminating what could be a negative message. Now, I know that universally, scientifically, that there's positive and negative energy in the universe. So I would be foolish to think that negative energy doesn't exist on the other side. But I don't allow that energy in. I'm kind of, protected in some way. And that's why I caution people and say that, there's no such thing as dabbling in the world of energy. I've had people come up to me and say, oh, you're my teacher. I studied you from your books and I do what you do now. And immediately I have to control myself and be like, you're an idiot. Because if you can even say that to me, you don't know anything. It's really important for people to know, like, you would never, go swimming in shark-infested waters with an open wound. Like, that would be foolish because it's going to attract those sharks and that puts you in a sense of danger. I feel the same way about my subject matter. If somebody is not really understanding the world of energy and how you have to protect yourself in swimming in those waters of energy, it can be quite dangerous. So I caution people all the time that to be aware of that. And one of the ways, and I'm talking at a practitioner level, but on a listener level, I think that prayer is so very, very important. And surrounding yourself in the light of prayer, not just for yourself, but for your loved ones as well, very helpful in healing.
How do you disconnect? How do you relax? Are you able to switch off?
I absolutely have to be able to switch off. Anybody who does this work knows that psychically, you have to know there's a time and place for doing it. It's kind of like metaphysics 101. You can't walk around reading people. That would be inappropriate because it's unethical. You don't just walk up to somebody and be like, I got a message for you, because you don't know where they're at in their level of grief.
And John, you are coming to South Africa, as I said, in March, and you're going to be holding a whole lot of seminars. In Joburg, there are going to be 2, which is great, on the 14th and 15th of March. Durban, the 16th of March, and Cape Town, the 18th of March. Is it going to be the same format as before? Is it a slightly different format? And perhaps you can just very quickly explain how the format works.
Well, for folks that are fans of the show Crossing Over, I pretty much take the show live. And the first part of the event, the first third of it, is kind of me explaining the process and talking about my experiences and helping to raise awareness about the subject matter like we just did. Then I answer people's questions, and then I dedicate the rest of the time to doing readings. And
John, do you ask people questions before? Do you know anything about them beforehand? Anything like that? Okay.
No, right. One of my funnest experiences was I went to Austin, Texas, and there was a woman who at the venue met me backstage, and she was so excited, and I thought she was excited because she was a fan, and she said to me, she's like, now how does this work? Do I have to bring people back, and then you talk to them ahead of time, and then I have to get them out in the audience? And I looked at her and I went, what? I went, oh, wait a minute. You don't think that what I do is real? And she laughed and she goes, of course not.
Really?
And I went, okay. I said, don't move. And she's like, what? I go, stay right next to me this entire time. And she went, okay. She goes, well, what's going to happen? I said, well, I'm going to stand here the entire time talking to you. I said, and then they're going to introduce me, and I'm going to walk out on stage, and then I'm going to do my thing, and you're going to stand on the side of the room, and then at the end of the event, I'm going to look at you, and then you're going to tell me what you think. So that's exactly what happened, and at the end of the event, she came backstage, and I went, so what do you think? And she broke out into a sweat, and she's like, I am so freaked out right now. I have no words for you. She goes, because I didn't think that this was possible, that it could be real. She goes, but there was absolutely no way. You walked in here 3 minutes before you had to walk out on stage. I was with you the entire time. She goes, and you read somebody on my staff. She goes, this has freaked me out completely.
Well, John,
which is always fun for me. It's fun for me to watch that kind of reaction too.
But I mean, not that you have to be proving anything to anyone, just the fact that you have people coming to see you, they're drawn to you. I mean, I know when you come to South Africa, people clamor to get your tickets, and it's because of the messages that come through and the connections that you have. So I know that South Africa is just waiting. It's been 3 years. It's been a long time, John Edward. And so we're delighted that you're returning. Thank you so much. And listen, thank you very much for your time. And until March, take care, and looking forward to seeing you in March. Really, really great chatting to John Edward. But we're going to move on because I don't know about you, and I don't know how active you are on Twitter. I'm not sure how active you are on Facebook, but you know, you can get really, really involved. So someone can post something and then you see it and you have an emotional response, and you're either saddened by what you read, or you are overcome with anger or frustration, and you quickly send it on, and before you know it, the story has turned into something maybe larger than it is, and maybe not. And it's just incredibly powerful how these stories can spread, sometimes in a very negative way and sometimes in a positive way. So we thought we would look at urban legends. We thought we'd look at how urban legends have changed over time and where they actually come from. So really the king of urban legends, and I say the king because he's written 6 books on looking at South African urban legends, and he's a best-selling author. He's also a journalist. He's a media analyst. He's a commentator on information and communications, and he's the MD of Worldwide Work. So I'm so delighted to introduce Arthur Goldstuck into the studio. Hello, Arthur.
Hi, Niki. It's great to be back in the studio with you.
Oh, it's lovely, lovely to have you in the studio. And I mean, before we even go to what is an urban legend, I came across the story, and I know that you are going to connect with the story, and maybe you at home will connect with the story. It's a story about a man who's at an airport, and he's got some time to kill. So what does he do? He goes along and he buys some cookies. There's Mrs. Field's cookies, and they're rather delicious, and he gets his favorite cookies and he puts them in a bag, and he sits down on the bench, and he puts his overcoat next to him, and he decides to start reading his newspaper. And in a couple of minutes he notices just out of the corner of his eye that there's this old bag woman who's come to sit inside the airport, obviously to keep herself warm, and on the bench right next to him. But he carries on reading his newspaper, but all the while he keeps glancing at her, because she seems a little bit strange to him. Now, before long, to his absolute amazement, he notices her reaching over, and she takes a cookie out of his bag, and she begins to eat one of his cookies. So, I mean, he's absolutely devastated. So he thinks, okay, how can I send her some type of message? I mean, I don't want to make a fuss or anything. So what he does is he then quickly pulls a cookie out himself, and he eats it quite loudly to show her that, you know, these are my cookies, leave them alone. And she looks at him very, very strangely, and then after a short period of time she pulls out another cookie and she begins eating it. Well, I mean, at this point the man is absolutely outraged. He glares at her angrily. He snatches up the very last cookie, and he takes the bag and he just crunches it up and he throws it away. And this woman, you know, looks at him really, really strangely, and she quickly gets up and she moves away as quickly as she possibly can. And he thinks, right, I showed her. Anyway, it was time for him to then board his aeroplane. So he folded his paper, he stood up, he picked up his overcoat, and what did he find? Still untouched on the bench, his bag of cookies. And well, is that an urban legend, or is that an urban legend? So I know, Arthur, that you took this very story and you adapted it to a South African way of looking at it in your book, The Rabbit in the Thorn Tree. Why was it important for you to use the story, and how did you make it relevant to South Africa?
Well, for one simple reason, I didn't adapt the story. Word of mouth adapted the story. The urban legend mill adapted the story. That is a classic urban legend, and it's been told in numerous forms all over the world. The classic British version, for example, is Oreo cookies. Yours is a different brand of cookies, probably an American version of the urban legend. The South African version of the legend is Kit Kat. So the guy buys a Kit Kat, puts it down on the table. This depending who you want to disparage in the urban legend, or who the sentiment is running against at that stage in society, it could be anything from a punk rocker, which was one of the versions told in the UK around Oreo cookies, to a grizzled little old lady. Could be a bag lady, but the South African version is just a traditional little old lady. It could be anyone else that you assume people have a prejudice against. This person sits down at the same table in a public place, usually a eating place or a public venue where it's quite crowded and people accept that someone is going to share their table with them. And this person has bought a Kit Kat and has put it down on the table. They kind of remember that's what they did. Meanwhile, looking around from perhaps reading a book or a newspaper or something, they see this lousy, miserable punk rocker opening the Kit Kat and taking out a bar or a strip. And in high dudgeon, the person, exactly as you describe it, very ostentatiously and aggressively grabs a piece. The punk rocker then grabs another piece, shoves it into his mouth, and then this person then grabs the last piece and shoves it into their mouth. And exactly as you say, an attitude of "so there," stands up and majestically sweeps away. As they close their bag, whatever it is, they see there's the Kit Kat in the bag. Now that is almost exactly as it was told in South Africa. So I didn't have to adapt it. I simply collected the stories as they were being told here, and then linked them to the international versions.
Interesting how it's been adapted.
It's fascinating. That's how urban legends usually work. The best urban legends tend to be ones that are told throughout the world as if it's a local story. So it picks up on local brands, local characteristics, local prejudices, and the like. And that's a wonderful example because it is so funny, but it also sends such a powerful message that says, don't judge people by their appearance. And that's the best thing that urban legends can do. They send a powerful social or moral message.
Well, Arthur, let's just clarify, what is an urban legend?
An urban legend is perhaps best explained by using a traditional term or description, which is an apocryphal tale, which means that it's a story that's told as true, but with no evidence that it really happened, and that has some kind of bearing on society, some kind of message that it sends. And building on that, the story tends to be adapted to place and time as well, and it evolves over time, so it starts looking like a different story, but you can trace the structure back to the original, what you could almost call the archetype. So to use academic language, most urban legends have an archetypal version. Some go back to the Bible, for example. Quite a few in my early books.
Like which ones?
The Vanishing Hitchhiker is the classic example. Now that's often told as a ghost story, but it's a classic urban legend, and every urban legend collection around the world usually has a local version of the Vanishing Hitchhiker. We know it as the White Lady of Uitenhage, although there are other descriptions as well.
Oh, I don't know it.
Near
Tell more.
Uitenhage, people are driving on this really isolated road, and it's a dark and stormy night, of course, and they see a young woman, usually dressed in white, hitchhiking on the side of the road, and they give the poor little drenched little girl a ride. She gets in the back, and she gives them an address, and off they set to that address. And one of a range of things can happen at this point, depending on the version of the urban legend that you're listening to. But the classic version is they feel a gust of wind, the door opens and closes at the back, or it doesn't have to close, but there's a gust of wind, they look behind, and the lady vanished. So they stop and look around, they think she's fallen out of the car, all kinds of things like that. No luck, they eventually drive to the house, and there they find a forlorn looking old woman who says yes, she knows. You don't have to tell me what happened. You tried to give my daughter a ride home. She died on that spot 10 years ago. So the Uitenhage version also has a motorbike rider picking up the girl. She also has a name. There's actually a real history to her. That's what makes the South African version so fascinating, is that the person who died on the road is actually identified and identifiable. But the urban legend is the idea that she's haunting that spot in the road, and she's been trying to get home ever since. Now what's also great about that urban legend is that there are quite a few Johannesburg versions of it, and the most famous one is the ghost or the vanishing hitchhiker of the Sandringham Dip, or the ghost of the Sandringham Dip.
Now that comes back to me. I remember hearing about that many years ago.
The moment you tell anyone who's ever driven in that area, they'll remember it suddenly. And similar thing, the Sandringham Dip used to be very spooky. You went down this dip, and there were these tall trees lining both sides of the road, and on the other side of the trees were one of these old hospitals, the Rietfontein Hospital, where there was a cemetery dating back to World War II in the grounds. Italian prisoners had been buried in that cemetery. So all kinds of reasons for the area to be haunted, but mostly because it just looks so spooky. Today they've chopped down all the trees. It looks like nothing of any kind of interest, nothing spooky at all, so no one's going to feel haunted. But back then, you knew that if you drove through the Sandringham Dip at midnight, you'd see the lady in white standing there waiting for a ride home. And you dare not pick her up because you'd never reach your destination.
Oh, so Arthur, I mean, how did that trace back to biblical times, though?
So in the Bible, I forget the exact example because I didn't arm myself with the evidence of that particular story, but one of this, I think Elijah going to heaven in a chariot is the archetype of that particular story. Where, but obviously the story has evolved a lot, and it's been traced by some of the academics studying urban legends as a university topic to that particular story, and they see it as having the same basic structure originally.
So there's a message that comes through in an urban legend. It could be a good one. That
one doesn't necessarily have a message.
That's just
that
to scare you.
There's a guy I quote in my first urban legends book who was the first person I ever met who'd studied it academically at university, and he had a great way of describing it. He said the urban legend is about the performance, and that means that it's told to entertain, to impress, of course, but to entertain as well. Even if people don't realize that's what they're doing, when they're telling an urban legend, they're actually putting on a performance. And the ghost stories are the best kind of performance that you can give as urban legends go, because you get that immediate reaction. You had that visceral reaction, that shiver up the spine. That's what the storyteller wants to achieve, and you don't really get that with standard funny urban legends. There you get a good laugh, and that is part of the performance, but to get that deep reaction from a ghost story is the best response to an urban legend. So that's where ghost stories in particular come into it. But the other function ghost stories play is to confirm people's belief or commitment to their belief systems about what happens after you pass away. And for a lot of people, let's call them supernatural urban legends, are important for them to believe as having really happened, because it confirms their own belief system. But as I showed in, or I hope I showed, or tried to show in The Ghost That Closed Down the Town, which was a collection of supernatural urban legends, most supernatural stories, most ghost stories are in fact urban legends.
Well, when I introduced John Edward, I said we've achieved so much, but the one thing we don't know, we haven't, is mastering death. First of all, defying death completely, and not only that, knowing what happens after death. So there's always, whether you believe in what John does or not, or you're talking about these supernatural legends, urban legends, and these are the stories that are told and will continue to be retold.
No, precisely.
And adapted.
Precisely, and that brings us to, I guess, what you could see as a purpose of ghost urban legends, is that they help people come to terms with what happens to their loved ones when they've died, or what's going to happen to themselves when they die. Supernatural stories give them some kind of almost structure for understanding the afterlife, even though there's no evidence whatsoever for what actually happens after you've died. The ghost story kind of provides that clue and that affirmation almost of your particular beliefs in the afterlife.
Right.
And you see that when you analyze the ghost stories of different or from different cultures, and you can see how people's experience of ghosts are entirely dependent on their own cultural touch points. And that to me is the evidence that most ghost stories are urban legends, because if they were physical, verifiable experiences, then everyone would experience ghosts in the same way, but they don't. It depends entirely on your belief system how you experience a ghost.
Well, what I find interesting is, as you say, a lot of it has to do with the storytelling, the master storytelling. And going back in time, storytelling was part of entertainment. It was how we passed on knowledge and we entertained one another, but now we live in a very different world. So storytelling and passing on orally is just, it's losing its value and its power today. Now it's technology. So we have this social networking, we have access to all of this information, and so now we are actually experiencing firsthand the birth of urban legends. So would it be an urban legend, or would it just be the start of one? I don't know if there's a new term we would have to give it. But you know what I'm saying, Arthur? I mean,
we actually do have a term for it these days, and that term is when there are two terms actually for two different concepts. One is the meme. The meme is like a joke or an image or a concept that suddenly takes off on the internet, typically via Facebook or Twitter, but also across the internet on YouTube and so on. And an example of a meme would be, let's say, when Gangnam Style suddenly became huge. Suddenly everyone was making a mockery of it as well, and putting it into the most bizarre context. So it was as much the popularity of the song as the idea of the song or the style of it becoming a basis for people to put all kinds of other commentary on, and that becomes a meme. And part of something becoming a meme is the other concept that relates to that, which is something going viral. And I guess that's what you're talking about. When something goes viral on the internet, people begin spreading it from person to person, from network to network, and it suddenly is everywhere. And that's what marketers aim at. Marketers could learn a lot from urban legends, in fact, but they tend not to. They think they can create something viral. You can't create something viral. It either goes viral or it doesn't.
But it has to be controversial to go viral. It has to be extreme, doesn't
controversial or very funny or incredibly cute.
Incredibly cute,
the most popular YouTube video for years was one called Charlie Bit My Finger, which was a baby who bit a kid's finger. That's hardly controversial or extreme, and yet that went completely viral. That's almost defined going viral. So to bring that back to urban legends, the way urban legends happen now is that a belief or a story or a claim suddenly goes viral. So it happens very fast, but that also means it gets debunked very fast.
Well, let's just talk about this, because you can get an email or can go out on Facebook that a particular company is doing something shocking. They're abusing the environment or animals or children or whatever it is, and they're touching a particular emotional point, and everybody jumps on the bandwagon and everyone starts criticizing, and it moves very, very quickly. You're creating a legend around this brand, aren't you?
Absolutely. Let's say 100 people respond to you posting something that you've heard in the supermarket about this company that you've just bought their products of, or where you've just shopped. Of those 100 people responding, probably 50 will say, everyone should know about this. I'm going to share it with everyone I know. I'm going to tell everyone I know. Another 48 will say, I'm never going to shop there again, or I'll never buy that brand again. And then maybe 2 will say, wait a minute, have you checked whether this is true? And of those 2, 1 will say, I have checked, and here it is, it's on Snopes, which is the place to go to if you want to check if something is an urban legend or not, snopes.com. You can also go to my site, my Urban Legends blog, urbanlegends.org, but I don't update it that often. Snopes is the go-to guy. There's also a site, urbanlegends.about.com, which is really good as well. Both of those. Between those 2, you'll generally find that almost any wild claim made on the internet will actually be lurking in there as an urban legend.
Well, I tweeted earlier, I said, are we part of a problem? You know, just tweeting, retweeting, or liking, or forwarding everything that comes our way. Do you think that it's just an indication of where we are in terms of our lives today, and we should all be flippant about it? Or do you think we should take a lot more responsibility about what we're reading and what we're passing on?
We certainly should take a lot more responsibility. It's no different to how urban legends and hoaxes and bizarre claims have been believed and spread over the decades, probably over the centuries. And many of the riots and panics that have happened over the past millennium, in fact, come from that kind of thing. My last book, The Burglar in the Bin Bag, in fact, looks specifically at the nature of hoaxes and panics, and it makes that statement that it's nothing new for people to believe and spread rumors irresponsibly without checking on their veracity, and there are consequences to that. So today, where Facebook and Twitter spreads these kind of things even faster, what would have taken months now takes seconds, we have even greater responsibility. But most people don't think when they're on social networks. They simply don't think. They just hit the share button or the retweet button or the reply button, and they type the first thing that comes into their heads. And that's one of the most damaging things you can do to your own reputation, but also potentially you can create damage out there as well.
So are there rules that we should follow when we deal with urban legends and this kind of information?
Yes, definitely. If a bizarre claim is made, or a bizarre video is posted, or it claims to be a bizarre video, first check the facts. For example, the bizarre videos that tend to be posted on Facebook tend to have a headline that says something like, amazing video, you have to see this, man bites shark's head off, or incredible video, alien swallows bicycle in Times Square, for example. And you click on it and it says, before you can view this, you must first like. And that's the most bizarre demand that you can possibly make of someone who hasn't seen the video. And it tells you that actually this is a scam to get people to like the video. If you do like it and then view it, you find it's got nothing to do with what the headline said, or it's been completely exaggerated or twisted. So the recommendation there is, don't like something that you don't really like, and make sure you're not being caught up in some kind of marketing scheme. Again, with bizarre claims, go to snopes.com or urbanlegends.about.com and first type in the keywords from that claim in there,
very important,
and see whether it actually has been reported, or at the very least Google it. Type in the headline of this story, type it into Google, and on the first page it should tell you whether it's a hoax or not, because it'll show that it's been reported in various other places. And the very fact that it's been reported all over the place tells you that there's something deeper here. It's not a new news story. And then, just generally speaking, you need to be constantly aware of the fact that bizarre claims are being made all the time, and you need to filter those claims through your common sense detector.
Common sense detector, I like
There's
that
actually a
very
less polite term for it.
Okay, no, we're keeping
Radio
it.
will call it the common sense
We'll
detector.
keep it. So that's Snopes.com. People can follow you on your blog as well, but also to get their hands on your books. I mean, 6 that you've written. You said The Rabbit in the Thorn Tree, The Burglar in the Bin Bag, The Ghost That Closed Down the Town, The Aardvark and the Caravan, The Leopard in the Luggage, Ink in the Porridge. Brilliant reads.
Thank you. You can buy e-versions of some of those now on the Penguin Books website. Some are available. The Ghost That Closed Down the Town and The Burglar in the Bin Bag, I think, are both on the Penguin Books website. The Rabbit in the Thorn Tree is on my blog site at urbanlegends.org.
Arthur, thank you. Lovely having you
Thanks,
on the
Niki.
show.
It
It's
was
been
great.
fantastic. And thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you have enjoyed the show, that you've been entertained, and just be careful when you're reading those urban legends. Once again, I am giving away that Colpad 2.7-inch tablet. Just go along to my Facebook page and like it, and I promise you I'm not going to sell you a funny urban legend when you do it. For me, Niki Seberini, until next week, take care, look after yourself. Goodbye.
Hi, my name is Esvia Prinsloo, and I'm the HOD of IT Integration at Bridwin Preparatory School in Melrose. We started using study apps about 6 months ago and have seen astonishing results. We were quite amazed to see how quickly the kids have been able to use study apps and the benefits it has shown with regards to reinforcing what they've already learned inside the classroom. I would highly recommend study apps for any school.
Studyapps.co.za. Conversations with Niki was brought to you by Studyapps.co.za, South Africa's leading education app for tablets.